The call came on a crisp autumn morning, a Tuesday I'll never forget. My son Mike, his voice tight with a forced cheerfulness, delivered the news that shattered my world. Dad, about the beach house. We decided it was time. We sold it. He spoke of financial opportunity, of new beginnings, of a weight lifted. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly imagine, was the quiet rage that simmered beneath my calm facade. That house wasn't just property. It was a lifetime of memories, my sanctuary, my late wife's legacy. He had stolen my past, betrayed my trust. But in that moment, as his words echoed in my ear, I began to plant seeds of a revenge he couldn't even comprehend. My name is Robert Miller, and this is the story of how a father, robbed of his most sacred memories, found a way to reclaim his honor. Before I share these painful truths, please consider subscribing to Wise Revenge and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your quiet understanding, your presence here, means more than you know. The beach house was more than just a house. It was the anchor of my life. Built with my own hands, brick by painstaking brick, over 20 summers. It sat nestled on a quiet stretch of coastline in Cape May, New Jersey, a place where the roar of the ocean could drown out the noise of the world. It was where I proposed to Eleanor, my late wife, where we brought Mike home from the hospital, where we spent every summer watching him grow, teaching him to fish, to build sandcastles, to love the rhythm of the tides. After Eleanor passed 10 years ago, the house became my sanctuary. Her scent still lingered in the cedar beams, her laughter echoed in the salt-kissed air. It was a place where I could speak to her, where her memory felt most alive. I had left it to Mike in my will, of course, but the understanding, the sacred trust, was that it would remain our family's haven, passed down through generations, a place of roots and continuity. Mike had always loved the beach house, or so I thought. He'd spent his childhood summers there, his young face perpetually tanned, streaked with sand and salt. As he grew, he brought his friends, then his girlfriend, Jennifer, who later became his wife. They hosted barbecues, brought their own children, my grandchildren, Clara and Ethan. It seemed destined to continue as the heart of our family, a living testament to our shared history. But in recent years, Mike's visits had grown less frequent. Jennifer, his wife, a woman of sharp edges and sharper ambition, always found reasons. Too far, too old, too much upkeep. She'd hinted, subtly at first, then with increasing impatience, that the house was a burden, a drain on resources. I, of course, paid for all the upkeep, the taxes, everything. I didn't mind. It was my duty. It was my joy. Then came the phone call, that crisp autumn Tuesday. Mike, his voice too bright, too practiced. "Dad," he began, "Jennifer and I have been talking, and with the kids getting older, their needs changing, and honestly, the market being so hot for beach properties, we decided it was time. We sold the Cape May house." My world tilted. The phone felt like a block of ice in my hand. "Sold it?" The words were a fragile whisper. "Mike, what are you talking about?" "You sold the house?" "Yeah, Dad. It just closed this morning. A fantastic offer. Way more than we expected, honestly. It's really going to help us out. We're looking at a bigger place closer to Clara's new school, maybe a little investment property." He rattled on, oblivious, or perhaps deliberately ignoring, the growing silence on my end. He spoke of new beginnings, of a weight lifted, of a smarter financial future for them. I gripped the phone, my knuckles white. "Mike, that house, that was your mother's legacy. That was our house. It wasn't yours to sell. Not yet." His cheerfulness evaporated, replaced by a defensive edge. "Dad, come on. It's been in my name for years, for estate planning. You signed the papers, remember? A few years back. It was all legal." He was right. A few years ago, Jennifer, ever the responsible one, had insisted I transfer the deed to Mike as part of future planning. I'd trusted him, my son. I'd seen it as a practical step, a way to simplify things when I was gone. I'd never imagined he would betray that trust while I was still drawing breath. "You said it was for the will, Mike. You said it would stay in the family." "And it will, Dad, in a way. We're just converting the asset. It's not a physical house anymore, but the value is still there for us. Look, I know this is a big change, but it's for the best. For everyone. For everyone. For them, not for me, not for Eleanor's memory, not for the ghost of laughter that still echoed in those rooms. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. The silence on my end lasted too long. Mike's voice softened, a hint of genuine worry, a flicker of the boy I knew. "Dad, are you okay?" "I'll call you back, Mike," I managed, and hung up before my voice could break. I sat in my armchair, the silence of my Philadelphia apartment suddenly suffocating. The air felt thin. My sanctuary, the place that tethered me to my past, to Eleanor, was gone. Sold, stripped away by my own son, the one I had raised alone after his mother died, the one I had poured my entire life into. The pain was excruciating, a raw wound. But beneath it, a slow, controlled burn began. It wasn't just hurt. It was a searing realization that I had been fundamentally, cruelly underestimated. Again. Let me explain who Robert Miller was in Mike and Jennifer's eyes. A kindly, aging widower. A retired mechanical engineer, living on a modest pension. Comfortably enough, but certainly not a man of significant means. I had always presented myself as careful with money, prudent, perhaps even a bit old-fashioned. They saw me as dependent, someone to be managed, someone whose opinions were quaint, whose assets were merely future inheritance to be liquidated for their convenience. The truth was, I had built a small, silent empire over 40 years of work and shrewd investment. When I retired in 2017, my pension was only a fraction of my true financial standing. I was a significant minority partner in a robotics manufacturing company, held substantial shares in a renewable energy firm, and owned several commercial properties outright. How did I achieve this? Patience, relentless study, and a quiet, unassuming nature that allowed me to observe opportunities others missed. In the 1980s, while raising Mike alone after Eleanor's passing, I took night courses in finance and real estate. I learned to read balance sheets like novels, to identify undervalued assets, to predict market shifts. Eleanor's life insurance policy, rather than being spent, became the foundation of my first strategic investments. During the 90s, while Mike studied and I worked, I invested every spare penny, nothing too risky. Always in sectors I understood, with trusted, quiet partners who respected my desire for discretion. My name never appeared on public documents. To the world, I was just Robert Miller, the quiet engineer, but for practical and legal purposes, I held significant influence in companies worth tens of millions. Why the secrecy? Why pretend to be less than I was? The answer at first was simple: Mike. He had always been a good boy, but easily swayed, especially by Jennifer. When he started dating her, I saw her ambition, her need for control. If she knew her dependent father-in-law was actually a man of wealth, it would complicate things. So I made a choice. To protect Mike's happiness, to preserve what I believed was a stable marriage, I kept my true financial situation a secret. I let them believe I lived on my pension. When they needed the down payment for their first house, I lent it to them. A gift, really. But I let them think it was a sacrifice from a retired father dipping into emergency reserves. For years it worked. Jennifer was rude, yes, but within limits. Mike seemed happy. The grandchildren were born. The family, though strained, was structured. I could endure the small humiliations if it meant my son was content. But people reveal who they truly are when they think they have power over you. And Jennifer, over the years, showed her true face. The malicious jokes about my age, the comments about me being a burden, the way she spoke to me in front of the children, teaching my own grandchildren to disrespect me. And Mike, my dear Mike, chose the easy life. He chose to stay quiet when his wife humiliated me, to pretend he didn't see, to change the subject. He chose the comfort of having a financially driven partner over defending the man who gave up everything to raise him. On that autumn Tuesday, when Mike delivered the news of the beach house sale, I finally understood there was no point in pretending fragility anymore. The mask of the unassuming old man had served its purpose for years, but now it was time to reveal who I really was. And who was I really? A 67-year-old businessman who had never lost an important battle in life, a man who raised a son alone, built wealth from scratch, and always knew how to defend himself. And yes, a man who owned a controlling stake in the very company that had just innocently facilitated the sale of my beach house. Mike had no idea. Jennifer had no idea. And that, I realized, was their greatest vulnerability. The discovery wasn't about betrayal itself. I had known about that for years. The discovery was about the final, breaking limit of my own patience. I carried my small suitcase through the door of my South Philly apartment that autumn afternoon with a calmness that surprised me. Mike had called back, guilt palpable in his voice. "Dad, I know it's hard, but it's done now. We can make new memories here at our house." He tried to comfort me, to reframe the profound loss into a trivial inconvenience. I ended the call quickly. During the ride to my apartment, a strange feeling took over. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was something much colder and more calculated. It was the certainty that the time had come to stop pretending. In my apartment, small but comfortable, I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and pen. I always liked to write important things by hand. This habit of a man of my generation never left me, and I began to make a list of everything I knew about the sale of the beach house and the people involved. First, the basics. The real estate agent, a slick, overeager woman named Brenda, whom Jennifer had picked. The buyer, a development company listed as Ocean View Properties LLC. Mike's stated reason for selling, financial opportunity, a bigger place, investments. Then came the details I had collected over the years, pretending to be the silly father-in-law who didn't understand modern business. The phone conversations Mike and Jennifer took, thinking I wasn't paying attention. Jennifer's constant complaints about Mike's lack of ambition, his slow progress in his career, the subtle signs of their increasing debt, the new car they bought but seemed stressed about, the private school tuition that kept increasing. I had always kept a quiet eye on their finances, their spending habits, their vulnerabilities. I had done it out of paternal concern, but now it became a strategic blueprint. I started digging into Ocean View Properties LLC. A quick search through my network revealed it was a newly formed shell company, incorporated only 6 months prior, with no public track record. Its registered agent was a small, independent law firm specializing in real estate transactions, a firm I happened to have a passive investment in through one of my larger holdings. The buyer was anonymous. The transaction seemed almost too clean, too fast, even for a hot market. It reeked of something off. The story of my hidden involvement in the real estate world began decades ago. One of my earliest and most profitable ventures was an investment in a quiet boutique law firm specializing in property and corporate law. Over the years, that investment had grown, providing me with not just financial returns, but also an invaluable network and access to information. Discretion was paramount in that firm, and my name never appeared on their public roster of partners. Officially, I was simply an anonymous, significant investor, represented by a proxy, an old friend named Charles, who handled all my legal and corporate interests. Charles was a man of impeccable integrity, utterly loyal, and privy to every detail of my secret wealth. Sitting in my kitchen that night, mentally reviewing everything I knew, an idea began to form. An idea so elegant in its simplicity, so profoundly ironic, that it made me smile for the first time in weeks. If Mike and Jennifer wanted to dispose of my sacred memories for their financial gain, I was going to show them exactly how dispossession felt. If they thought they could humiliate me by treating me as worthless, I was going to teach them what true worth and true power meant. And if my own son chose convenience over the father who raised him, maybe it was time for him to discover who truly sustained the comfortable life he so carelessly took for granted. I picked up my cell phone, a simple smartphone that allowed me to do everything I needed, and sent a discreet message to Charles. "Good evening, Charles. I need your eyes on a recent property transaction. Cape May, the old beach house. It's important." His response came in minutes. "Of course, Robert. Send me the details. Anything for you. My full attention." I smiled, looking at the phone screen. Poor Mike. Poor Jennifer. They had no idea of the storm that was forming. And the most ironic thing of all, the storm had been brewing quietly within the very systems they sought to exploit. And the man controlling it was the helpless father they had just discarded. That night, for the first time in a long time, I went to sleep with a sense of grim anticipation. The conversation with Charles happened the next morning via secure video call. Seeing his familiar, earnest face on my laptop screen brought a sense of relief I hadn't felt in a long time. Someone who treated me with the respect I deserved, someone who understood the weight of my quiet decisions. "Robert, my friend, how are you? I received your message. Beach house, you said?" I adjusted my glasses. "I'm well, Charles. Actually, I need your immediate assistance regarding that property. My son, Mike, sold it." I relayed the story, careful to keep my voice even, though my blood still boiled beneath the surface. Charles frowned, his expression darkening with each detail. Sold it? Behind your back? But you conveyed the deed to him for estate purposes only, a trust in all but name. Precisely, I replied. And the buyer, Ocean View Properties LLC, seems opaque. I want you to dig deep. Find out everything about that transaction. Who are they? Where did the money come from? Any irregularities, no matter how small. It would be a pleasure, Robert. I've had my eye on some of these new development companies that spring up overnight, often fronts for less than savory dealings. And if your son has been caught in something, well, we'll find it. My heart raced with a different kind of anticipation now. Charles, what a coincidence. I have some concerns about irregularities in Mike's personal expenses and his financial management over the last year. Nothing compromising yet, but it would be good to have a fresh eye analyzing his recent bank statements, his credit score, any recent loan applications. You've always been excellent with financial forensics. Charles' eyes twinkled with understanding. Indeed, Robert, a fresh eye it is. Consider it done. It would be a pleasure, I replied. And this time, I didn't need to hide the grim satisfaction. Within hours, Charles had deployed his team. His firm had access to vast databases, financial records, and real estate networks that Mike and Jennifer couldn't even dream of. What they found over the next few days was even worse than I had imagined. Jennifer wasn't just an ambitious woman with expensive tastes. She was a reckless gambler, fueled by a craving for status. Her pursuit of a higher standard of living for Mike and the children had driven them deep into debt. Mike, blinded by her ambition and his own desire to please her, had gone along with it, stretching their finances to the breaking point. The bigger place they were looking at was far beyond their means. The investment property was a pipe dream. The sale of the beach house, it turned out, was not just about opportunity. It was a desperate act. Mike was facing significant personal debts from failed speculative investments Jennifer had pushed him into, a digital marketing startup that imploded, a crypto venture that vanished. He had even, horrifyingly, taken out a second mortgage on his own primary residence, using the beach house as a means to cover his spiraling financial hole, without any intention of buying a new one. The $21 million figure I had initially thought was just a hypothetical sum in their grand plans was actually the price they got for my beach house, and it was used to bail them out of deep, self-inflicted financial ruin. And the buyer, Ocean View Properties LLC, it was a legitimate but highly aggressive development firm that bought distressed or quickly available properties for immediate, often cut-rate, resale or redevelopment. My initial fears of a direct link to Jennifer were unfounded, but the speed and the anonymity of the transaction spoke volumes about Mike's desperation. He had sold off a family heirloom, a sacred trust, at lightning speed for a quick cash injection without consulting me. Sitting there with Charles's preliminary report spread on my table, I had a disturbing revelation. The comfortable standard of living my son so admired in his wife, the expensive vacations, the designer clothes, the new car, were all financed on the edge of a financial precipice. Mike was not just a naive accomplice. He was deeply entangled, facing ruin. Indirectly, Jennifer was draining my son's future, jeopardizing his family, and using my sacred property as a last-ditch bailout. The irony was almost poetic in its cruelty. But the most interesting discovery came when Charles analyzed the timeline of Mike's recent financial woes. There was a pattern. Each time Mike's debts mounted, each time he panicked, Jennifer would push harder for some big financial move, a new loan, a new investment scheme, or in this case, the sale of the beach house. She was not just leading him into debt, she was pressuring him into increasingly desperate measures to maintain her desired lifestyle, all while hiding the true extent of their financial peril from me. I picked up my cell phone and called Mike. My voice was calm, almost too calm. "Son, I've been thinking about the beach house. I know it's done, but I wanted to understand the full scope of it. The closing documents, the finances. Can you walk me through it?" Mike stammered, surprised. "Dad, why? It's just a done deal. Nothing for you to worry about." "Mike, it was my home for 50 years. I think I deserve to understand the details. The real estate agent, the buyer, the final figures. I'd like to see the breakdown of how that $21 million was used." The silence on the other end was deafening. "Dad, I can't really go into all the details right now. It's complicated." Complicated. If he only knew that I not only understood the complexities of such transactions, but literally had Charles's meticulous report on my table, detailing every hidden debt, every failed investment, every desperate, fraudulent loan application he had made. That afternoon, I called Charles again. Charles, I've decided on the strategy. It's time to put pressure on Mike. Not directly, not yet, but through the new owners of the beach house. In the days that followed, I dove even deeper into the investigation, this time not just on Mike and Jennifer, but on Ocean View Properties LLC. What I discovered made me realize the layers of opportunity within my grasp. The firm had bought the beach house quickly, yes, but they were already facing unexpected permitting delays for their redevelopment plans. There were whispers of archaeological finds on neighboring properties, slowing down construction permits across the entire area. A subtle, almost imperceptible tremor in the market that could turn a quick flip into a costly long-term hold. And I knew the right levers to subtly, legally, pull. Through contacts Charles had in the sector, we got information about the key figures behind Ocean View Properties. One of their major investors had a history of backing highly leveraged projects, prone to panic when things turned sour. Their lead architect had recently faced a minor professional ethics complaint. Small cracks, but ones I knew how to widen. During that week, while pretending to be adjusting to life without the beach house, I established an investigation routine. Mornings analyzing documents, afternoons doing online research, nights organizing evidence and planning next steps. I discovered that Mike, besides the crippling loans, had also taken out a series of high-interest credit card debts under his own name, attempting to cover daily expenses. Jennifer, meanwhile, had taken out a personal line of credit using inflated salary projections from her job. Mike was drowning, and Jennifer was just adding more weight. But the revelation that impacted me most emotionally came through a conversation I managed to record unintentionally. Charles and I were on a video call discussing Mike's financial irregularities. My phone rang. It was Mike. I asked for permission and answered, but forgot to turn off the laptop microphone. "Dad, how are you? I know things are different now, but Jennifer said you can come for dinner on Sunday. But she asked you not to stay too late, okay? Because of the kids." I felt a pang in my chest. My own son, a grown man, was asking his wife's permission for me to have dinner at his house, and setting a curfew. "Of course, son, whatever Jennifer wants. And Dad," he continued, "she also said it would be good if you contributed something for dinner, like bringing a dessert or helping with food expenses. You know how things are tight because of the beach house sale. Things are tight, Dad. Tight." Jennifer, who had just helped him sell my beach house for millions, was worried about a dessert. Mike, who was living on the precipice of ruin, was asking his father, who they thought lived on a modest pension, to contribute to dinner. After I hung up, I noticed Charles had heard the entire conversation. His embarrassed silence told me everything. "Robert," he said, "I didn't know the personal situation was so complicated." "Now you understand why this investigation is important to me," I replied. "It's not just about a property. It's about dignity. It's about discovering what kind of people I have as a son and daughter-in-law." That night alone in the apartment, I had an epiphany about something that had been bothering me for years. The changes in Mike's behavior hadn't started after his marriage. They had started subtly during the engagement, when Jennifer began to subtly educate him about financial independence and family responsibilities. I remembered old conversations where she suggested Mike talk to me about being more independent, or not depending so much on family handouts. At the time, I thought she was encouraging him to be self-sufficient. Now I understood she was systematically alienating Mike from me to have total control over him, to make him solely dependent on her vision of their future. And it had worked. Over the years, my son became increasingly distant, increasingly understanding of his wife's rudeness, increasingly convinced that I was really a burden in his life. Jennifer wasn't just a reckless spender, she was a manipulator, and my son had become an unwitting accomplice to my own humiliation. It was on the night of October 25th, 2020, that Robert Miller, the submissive father, died definitively. And in his place was born something I didn't even know existed inside me, a man with real power, willing to use it without mercy. The transformation happened while I was organizing all the evidence against Jennifer and Mike in well-labeled folders, documents of Mike's crippling debt, proof of the unauthorized beach house sale, screenshots of Jennifer's ostentatious social media, financed by their recklessness, bank reports, everything meticulously catalogued and prepared for a presentation that would destroy their carefully constructed lives in a matter of minutes. It was at that moment that I realized a disturbing truth. I was enjoying it. It wasn't just about justice or regaining respect. It was about power, real, concrete power to decide the fate of those who had humiliated me, who had stolen my sacred memories. Mike and Jennifer had no idea, but the helpless old man they despised was holding in his hands the ability to destroy everything they had built in the last 5 years. Their future, Mike's career, their financed house. Without the beach house money, their facade would crumble. Their marriage? Very likely it wouldn't survive the financial pressure and public humiliation. And the darkest part of me whispered, they deserve all of this. During that week, I began testing small manipulations, just to see how far I could push the situation without raising suspicion. First test. I called Mike, pretending to be worried about news of interest rate hikes. Son, I heard mortgage rates are climbing. Is your new house going to be okay? Mike sighed, stressed. Dad, don't worry. The beach house sale covered a lot. We're stable. I smiled alone in my apartment. Stable. He had no idea how precariously balanced their lives were. That's good, son. Imagine if you lost your new house now, after everything. Wow, Dad, don't even say something like that. God forbid. Second test. On Sunday, when I went to dinner at their house, bringing an expensive bottle of wine I knew they couldn't afford, I observed Jennifer interacting with Clara, my 8-year-old granddaughter. She was teaching Clara a game and said something that chilled my blood. Look here, champ. In life, you have to be smart. There are people who command and people who obey. Your mommy is the type who commands, understand? And when you grow up, you'll also be the boss of your house. Clara asked innocently. And Grandpa Robert, who does he command? Jennifer looked at me with a malicious smile. Grandpa Robert is the type who obeys. Right, Grandpa? In that moment, holding my juice glass at the kitchen table, I made an irreversible decision. That woman wasn't just going to lose her status. She was going to discover what it meant to be publicly humiliated, the same way she had been humiliating me for years. Jennifer, I said calmly, you don't need to yell at the child. Clara just asked an innocent question. She looked at me with barely disguised anger. I raise my children how I think best, Jim. Jim. Still Jim. Of course, I replied, maintaining the sweet tone. I just think it's important they learn to respect their elders. It's a matter of family education. The tension was palpable. Mike tried to change the subject. The children sensed the heavy atmosphere. And Jennifer was discovering she could no longer intimidate me like before. During dessert, I made my boldest move. Jennifer, since you understand so much about real estate, can I ask you a question? If a person had, let's say, about $50,000 saved, do you think it would be good to invest in a Cape May Beach property right now? She almost choked on the pie. $50,000 saved. Do you think it would be good to invest in a Cape May Beach property right now? She almost choked on the pie. $50,000 saved. Do you think it would be good to invest in a Cape May Beach property right now? She almost choked on the pie. 50,000? Jim, where would you get all that money? Oh, it's just a supposition. A friend from church said he inherited an amount and was asking for advice. Her dismissive tone was immediate. Look, even if it were true, your friend, doesn't have enough knowledge for this type of investment. It's very volatile. Better to leave it in the bank. But don't you say the Cape May market is very solid? It seems like a good business. Jennifer's fork stopped in the air. She looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. Fear. Why do you keep asking specifically about Cape May? Father-in-law curiosity, I replied innocently. We always take pride in family successes, right? That Sunday, while returning to my apartment, I knew I had achieved exactly what I wanted. Jennifer was paranoid, insecure, beginning to suspect something wasn't right. She just didn't imagine that the something was me. The week leading up to the final confrontation was a symphony of psychological manipulation that I orchestrated with the precision of an experienced conductor. On Monday, October 26th, Charles executed the first part of our plan. He contacted Ocean View Properties LLC, the buyer of my beach house, with a discreet inquiry about the ongoing permit delays in Cape May. Mr. Miller, Charles later told me, they were already twitchy. My call just exacerbated their existing concerns. They bought your property for a quick turnaround, and the market's gone soft on them. On Tuesday, I escalated the pressure. I called Mike with paternal concern. Son, I saw some news about new environmental regulations hitting beachside developments. I hope it's nothing related to the company that bought our Cape May house. Mike sighed, stressed. Dad, why are you saying that? Did something happen? No, son. It's just that you know how I worry about you guys. And with this market, any real estate problem gets more complicated. You're making me nervous, Dad. Sorry, my son. Just a father's worry, but I'm sure everything's fine. You made a good decision, right? Good decision. The words tasted like ash. On Wednesday, Charles called with interesting information. Robert, Ocean View is reaching out to the original sellers, your son, Mike. They're asking about full disclosure on zoning and potential environmental impacts. They seem to be looking for a way out of their current bind. Perfect. She's behaving exactly as we expected. The fish was taking the bait. On Thursday, I made a strategic appearance. I called Mike. But this time, after our usual pleasantries, I mentioned a large, complex investment I was making, casually dropping names of influential bankers and corporate attorneys. Son, I said, I'm looking to diversify my portfolio, thinking about some high-yield corporate bonds. My advisor, Mr. Hastings from Sterling and Finch, suggested a few options. Perhaps you know the firm? Mike's voice was filled with a new, unfamiliar respect. Sterling and Finch? Wow, Dad, that's a big firm. No, I don't know them personally, but they're top tier. The seed of doubt about my supposed pensioner status was now firmly planted in his mind. On Friday, the pressure reached its peak. Charles called Mike directly, acting as a concerned party about the Cape May property. He raised questions about certain clauses in the sale contract, about the speed of the transaction, about Mike's apparent lack of urgency in handling some post-sale paperwork that was, conveniently, now causing headaches for Ocean View Properties. He didn't make accusations, just asked pointed questions about due diligence and potential liabilities that could, hypothetically, come back to the original seller. That night, Mike came home transformed into a human wreck. Jennifer called me, worried. Dad, Mike is very strange. He barely ate dinner, spent the whole night on the laptop, and when I asked what was happening, he just mumbled about legal complications with the beach house sale. Poor thing. This pandemic has everyone stressed. Dad, Mike asked later, his voice low, filled with a new paranoia. In recent days, there's been some strange calls about the Cape May house. Someone with a law firm. It's confusing. They're asking about the specifics of the sale, whether everything was fully disclosed. What do you think is going on? My heart raced, but I kept my voice calm. Complications, son? What kind? Oh, I wouldn't know. I'm just an old man. You and Jennifer handled all that. The irony was so delicious, I had to bite my tongue not to laugh. Mike wasn't relaxed, and Jennifer much less. Sunday, November 1st, was dedicated to final preparations. Not just logistical, but emotional, because I knew that after what would happen on Monday, there would be no turning back. I spent the morning organizing my personal file. All evidence against Mike and Jennifer in labeled folders. Documents of Mike's crippling debt, proof of the unauthorized beach house sale, screenshots of Jennifer's reckless spending, Charles's meticulous reports detailing every discrepancy in the sale, copies of all important documents, screenshots of compromising conversations organized chronologically, 40 pages of solid evidence that would destroy their carefully constructed lives in a matter of minutes. But the hardest part of the preparation was emotional, because as much as Mike and Jennifer deserved what was coming, I knew my revenge would have collateral victims. Clara and Ethan, sitting in the living room armchair, looking at family photos scattered on the shelf. I allowed myself a few minutes of doubt. Was I doing the right thing? Wasn't there another way? But then I remembered the humiliation I felt when Jennifer told me to get lost, when Mike allowed it. I remembered Clara asking why Mommy got mad when Grandpa visited. I remembered 8 years of disrespect, malicious jokes, being treated like a parasite by the family I helped support, the family I poured my life into. And most acutely, I remembered the crushing pain of learning my sacred beach house, my last tangible link to Eleanor, had been sold behind my back. No, there was no other way. Mike and Jennifer had made their choice when they decided to strip me of my dignity and my past. Now they were going to discover the true price of that choice. At 3 p.m., Charles called me to finalize the last details. Robert, it's confirmed for tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Mike and Jennifer will arrive thinking it's just a routine conversation with the new buyers about some paperwork. They have no idea what's waiting for them. Perfect, I said. Are you sure you want to reveal yourself as the orchestrator? After that, there's no way to hide anything from your family anymore. That's exactly the idea, Charles. I'm tired of pretending fragility. It's time to show who I really am. That night, I had productive insomnia. I stayed up until 3 a.m., mentally rehearsing every phrase I would say, every reaction I expected from Mike and Jennifer, every possible development. Because you see, destroying someone's life isn't something you do improvised. It's an art that requires planning, precision, and above all, emotional coldness. And after 8 years being underestimated, I had developed these 3 qualities in abundance. On Monday morning, I woke up at 6 a.m. with a feeling I hadn't experienced in years, genuine excitement, the same kind of adrenaline I felt in the 1980s when I closed an important deal or made a risky investment decision. I chose my clothes carefully. A navy blue suit and blazer set I bought in the 1990s that always gave me confidence. Well-polished but comfortable shoes, discreet cologne, well-combed hair. The appearance of an experienced executive, not a poor father-in-law. At 1:30 p.m., I was in Charles's car, in the parking lot of the imposing law firm he managed. He had insisted on picking me up. Last chance to give up, he said, turning off the engine. I looked at the building through the windshield, a fortress of steel and glass where the city's power truly resided. Charles, I said calmly, it's been weeks since I learned my son sold my beach house, the home of my late wife, behind my back. A home built with my hands, filled with 50 years of memories. He used the proceeds to bail himself out of debt he incurred, chasing his wife's vanity. Giving up is not on the menu. At 1:55 p.m., we entered the building. Employees greeted Charles with respect and looked at me with curiosity. Some whispered. The news about my condition as a significant investor in the firm had circulated, but few knew me personally. At exactly 2 o'clock, Mike and Jennifer appeared in the waiting area. They looked visibly nervous. Jennifer clutched a designer handbag. Mike's tie was slightly askew. They greeted Charles politely and then saw me. Mike's jaw dropped. Jennifer's eyes widened, a flicker of fear. "Jim," she stammered, "what are you doing here?" Charles smiled, a thin, almost imperceptible curve of his lips. "Jennifer, Mike, meet Mr. Robert Miller, my primary and most valued silent partner, in this firm and in several other ventures." The world stopped. Jennifer looked at me, looked at Charles, looked at me again, her face drained of color. Mike simply stared, slack-jawed. The carefully constructed facade of their lives began to crack. "Partner?" Jennifer finally managed, her voice a reedy whisper. "That's right, Jennifer," I replied, my voice calm, almost sweet. "I've been a significant investor in this law firm for decades, and I hold controlling stakes in the very companies that bought your little beach house. Pleasure to meet you officially." It was at that moment that I saw exactly what I wanted to see. The look of 2 people who had just realized they had completely underestimated the wrong man. "Let's go to the conference room," Charles suggested, with a cordiality that fooled no one. Mike and Jennifer were still standing in the hallway, looking at me as if they had seen a ghost, a specter of their past choices come back to haunt them. Some employees began to approach, curious about the commotion. It was exactly what I wanted, an audience for what was coming. "Of course," I replied calmly. "Mike, Jennifer, aren't you going to join us?" Mike, dazed, began to move. Jennifer, her hands shaking slightly, picked up her handbag. When she stood up, she tried to regain composure, a futile effort. Mr. Miller, I didn't know that. How is it that Mike's father is a partner in this firm?" I completed the sentence for her. "Life, right? Full of surprises. Deep ones." We walked to the conference room in silence. Charles opened the door and, as agreed, left it ajar. In the hallway, at least 5 employees pretended to be busy, but it was obvious they were paying rapt attention. The room had an oval wooden table with 8 chairs. Charles sat at the head. I positioned myself to his right, a place traditionally reserved for top partners. Mike and Jennifer stood, clutching their bags and folders, not knowing where to position themselves. "Sit there, Mike. Jennifer, over there," Charles said, pointing to chairs opposite me. "Let's talk about the Cape May property." Jennifer sat slowly, placed her bag on the table, but didn't open it. Her hands were visibly sweaty, and she couldn't maintain eye contact with me. Mike, meanwhile, looked like a defeated child. "Mike, Jennifer," I began, my voice professional, detached. I'll be direct. My beach house in Cape May, the one you sold behind my back, the one that was supposed to be a family legacy. We have reason to believe the sale was executed under duress, with significant financial irregularities on your part. Specifically, the undisclosed debts Mike incurred and the fraudulent loan applications he made, all leading to the desperate need to liquidate that property. Mike flinched. Jennifer opened and closed her mouth several times without being able to form words. Furthermore, I continued, consulting my notes, Charles's meticulous report, the funds from that sale, all $21 million, were immediately used to pay off Mike's personal debts. Debts accrued through reckless investments Jennifer pushed him into. This, without counting the second mortgage Mike took out on his primary residence, also undisclosed. The silence in the room was deafening. Jennifer's face was ashen. Mike stared at his hands. But the most interesting thing, I continued, my voice now laced with bitter irony, is discovering that the woman who called me a burden for 8 years was literally driving my son into ruin, then using my sacred property to bail him out. And Mike, my own son, stood by, allowing the sale of a home that meant more to me than any financial transaction, a home built on 50 years of love and memories. It was at that moment that Jennifer finally found her voice. Jim, I didn't know that. Didn't know what, Jennifer? I asked. That I wasn't the useless old man you thought. That I had my own money. That I understood business. Look, about the things I said at home, I was stressed. It wasn't anything personal. Not anything personal? The phrase echoed in the room like a confession of guilt. Oh, it wasn't personal? So when you called me a burden, when you suggested my home was a drain, when you convinced my son to sell my legacy behind my back, what was that? Good neighbor policy? Charles took the opportunity to intervene, his voice calm but firm. Jennifer, besides the financial irregularities surrounding the Cape May sale, it has come to our attention that you have repeatedly encouraged Mike into high-risk, undisclosed ventures that have jeopardized his financial stability. This constitutes a clear pattern of financial misconduct and manipulation. Jennifer looked at me, an expression that mixed fear, anger, and something I instantly identified, humiliation, the same humiliation she had imposed on me for years. What do you want from me? She finally asked, her voice cracking. We want the beach house returned, I stated, my voice cold and clear. And we want full restitution for the emotional and financial distress caused by your deceit. Effective immediately, Ocean View Properties LLC is initiating a legal challenge to the sale, citing material non-disclosure from the seller, Mike Miller, regarding the property's true familial and sentimental value and the circumstances of his financial duress. We have the leverage to freeze the property's assets, and potentially even Mike's other financial holdings, until this is resolved. Mike finally looked up, his eyes wide with dawning horror. Dad, you can't. I can, I replied. And I will. Your actions have consequences, Mike. And Jennifer, you should have thought about that before pushing my son to steal from his father. This isn't just about a beach house. It's about betrayal. Robert, please, Jennifer pleaded. For the first time in 8 years, she called me please, instead of giving me orders. We can talk about this. I can explain. Explain what, Jennifer? I asked, opening my folder and spreading documents on the table. Explain this bank statement showing Mike's undisclosed crypto losses from last year, screenshot next to it, or this loan application using his primary residence as collateral, filed days before the beach house sale, another paper on the table, or maybe this one, showing the immediate liquidation of the beach house funds directly into a high-interest debt repayment, not into a new house or investment, as you promised, Mike? With each document, Jennifer became paler. Charles observed in silence, shaking his head. How did you get all this? Jennifer whispered, her voice barely audible. I got it by being exactly what you always accused me of not being, intelligent, competent, and owner of my own money, I replied. For 8 years, you completely underestimated me. You thought I was a poor old man dependent on your charity. It never crossed your mind that I could be a businessman with my own wealth. But why didn't you ever say anything? Because I wanted to protect my son's marriage, I confessed, the words tasting bitter. I thought that by enduring your rudeness and pretending to be fragile, I would be preserving his happiness. What a foolish mistake of mine. Jennifer tried one last desperate card. Jim, Robert, Mike can't know about this. It will destroy our marriage. Will it destroy? I asked with irony. Jennifer, your marriage is already destroyed. You just haven't realized it yet. Do you think your husband will continue on your side when he discovers that the successful wife he so admires is actually a reckless gambler, driving him into ruin? That his primary home could be lost because you won't be able to pay the installments without a job or without the beach house money? Reality began to hit Jennifer like a hammer blow. She put her head in her hands. My children, she murmured. Your children will learn a valuable lesson about character, I replied without mercy. They'll discover that the mother who taught about who commands and who obeys was actually a dishonest manipulator who gambled away their future. Charles intervened. Jennifer, you have two options. We proceed with the legal challenge to the beach house sale, which will expose all of Mike's financial misdealings and your role in them. Or you both sign an agreement to facilitate the immediate return of the beach house to Mr. Miller, along with a significant financial compensation for its unlawful sale, in exchange for him dropping all current and future claims. How long do I have to return the money? She stammered. It's not about returning money, Jennifer, I cut in. It's about the house back in my name, unencumbered, and a sum of money for the pain, for the memories desecrated. The legal process will determine the amount, but be assured it will be substantial. You'll have to explain to everyone why you need to sell assets, why Mike is facing ruin. You'll have to tell the truth. The truth, Jennifer repeated, as if the word were poisonous. Yes, the truth, I said. That thing you avoided for years. The truth about who you really are. You know what's the most ironic part of all this, Jennifer? I asked, leaning back in my chair with a smile that had nothing sweet about it. For all these years, you were literally eating the bread that I, Robert Miller, provided. Your comfortable lifestyle, Mike's perceived success, even the down payment on the house you live in, all indirectly financed by profits from my companies, or by my generosity. No, this can't be true. Want to see the transfer receipts? I offered, taking more papers from the folder. Whenever Mike needed borrowed money, he was actually receiving gifts from me. I just let him believe it was a loan to preserve your pride, Jennifer. Charles completed my thought. This means, Jennifer, that you were living in a house bought with money from the man you called a burden, driving a car financed by his companies, while pushing his son into ruin and attempting to sell his most cherished property. The irony was so perfect that for a moment I felt sorry for Jennifer, just for a moment. Jim, Robert, she tried one last time. I always respected you. Respected? I exploded, losing composure for the first time. You told me to get lost from my own son's house, called me a bum in front of my grandchildren. You bled my son dry, pushed him to sell my sacred home, and now you come with excuses of respect. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of voices in the hallway. Other employees had approached, attracted by the discussion. Charles finally said, I think Mike and Jennifer need a few minutes to process the situation. How about we take a break for them to decide how they want to proceed? Good idea, I agreed, standing up. You have 30 minutes to decide. Either sign the agreements for the house's return and compensation, or we proceed with the full legal action, which includes exposing all of Mike's financial fraud to the public and your role in it. And believe me, my version of the story will be much more detailed than yours. We left the room, leaving Mike and Jennifer alone with their documents and their shattered reality. In the hallway, employees pretended to be busy, but it was obvious everyone was curious. How are you feeling? Charles asked quietly. Relieved, I replied honestly. After 8 years pretending to be fragile, it's liberating to show who I really am. We returned to the room. Jennifer was sitting in the same position, head in her hands. Mike was pacing, pale. They looked up. We'll sign, Mike said, his voice flat, devoid of fight. Very well, said Charles, taking the documents. The property return and compensation agreement will be formalized immediately. Mike and Jennifer stood up slowly, picked up their folders, and walked to the door. At the threshold, Jennifer turned to me, her eyes hollow. How are you going to explain this to Clara and Ethan? I'm not going to explain anything, Jennifer, I replied calmly. You and Mike are going to get home and explain why the beach house is gone, why your financial situation has changed, and why Mike is facing legal scrutiny. You'll justify why your comfortable life is crumbling. And you'll do this without blaming me, because you know very well whose fault it is. Mike and Jennifer left the room with their heads down. Through the hallways, employees whispered. The news that the Cape May property was being contested, that Mike Miller was facing serious legal issues, would spread like wildfire. Sitting in that conference room, watching them walk away defeated, I felt a satisfaction I never imagined being capable of experiencing. It wasn't joy, it was something deeper and darker. It was the feeling that justice had finally been done. The woman who humiliated me was humiliated. The son who betrayed me faced the consequences of his complicity. The ones who called me a parasite discovered who really depended on whom. Robert Miller learned the hard way that you should never underestimate a 67-year-old man who built wealth alone and pretended fragility out of love for family. Now, I just had to wait to see how Mike would react when the full truth and its crushing consequences reached home. You know what's the difference between revenge and justice? Revenge you savor, justice you just accept. Today, 5 years after that November 2020 day, I can say with certainty that what I did was revenge and that I savored every minute of it. Mike discovered the full truth that same night. Jennifer arrived home, shattered. I know because he called me at 7:15 p.m., crying in a way I hadn't heard since he was a child and fell off his bicycle at age 7. "Dad, what did you do?" were his first words between sobs. "I didn't do anything excessive, son," I replied calmly. "I just revealed who I really am, and what you and Jennifer chose to do." "Jennifer told me everything," he choked out. "That you were behind this, that you're demanding the beach house back, that we have to pay I don't know how many thousands in compensation, that Ocean View is suing us for non-disclosure." "The compensation is for $1.5 million, I stated precisely, plus the full return of the beach house, unencumbered. And yes, Ocean View Properties is suing you both for fraud. You concealed your financial distress and used my property to escape your debts." The silence on the other end of the line lasted almost a minute. When Mike spoke again, his voice was different, colder, more controlled. "You planned this, didn't you? You knew from the beginning about all my debts, about Jennifer's recklessness. You kept pretending to be poor just to humiliate us?" "To protect you," I replied calmly. "For 8 years I pretended to be dependent to preserve your marriage. I endured humiliations, disrespect, rudeness, all so you could be happy, so you would have a stable family. And now I'm going to be happy losing the house, taking the children out of private school, seeing my wife destroyed. Destroyed wife. As if Jennifer were the victim of the story. Mike, your wife wasn't destroyed by me. She destroyed herself when she decided to gamble away your future, steal my peace, and humiliate her husband's father. And you allowed it to happen. But you could have talked to her, given her a chance," he pleaded, desperation surfacing. "Why did it have to be so cruel? Cruel," the word echoed in my silent apartment. My own son was calling me cruel for revealing that his wife was a thief and he was complicit. "Son," I said, my voice hardening, "when you chose to stay quiet while that woman told me I was a burden, when you allowed her to sell my beach house, my sanctuary, wasn't that cruel? When you chose your comfort over my dignity, wasn't that cruel?" "It was different, Dad." "Different? Why? Because I'm old and should accept anything? Because I'm a father and should sacrifice myself eternally for my children, even when they betray me?" The conversation ended with Mike hanging up on me. We didn't talk for 3 months. During those 3 months, I followed the developments of my revenge, like someone watching a soap opera. Jennifer tried to get jobs in real estate or development, but news of the Ocean View lawsuit and the details of the compensation had spread through the sector. Nobody wanted to hire a manager with a history of financial misconduct and legal battles. The compensation amount, that $1.5 million, was formalized quickly. Mike and Jennifer had to sell off every liquid asset they had, including Jennifer's designer items and Mike's new car, to cover it. The beach house was returned to me, unencumbered, though the legal battle with Ocean View Properties continued, with Mike and Jennifer now solely liable. The children left private school and went to public school. Mike went back to work, something he hadn't done in years, as a manager at a local hardware store. And me, I returned to my normal routine as a retired businessman, now with the added joy of reclaiming my beloved beach house, monthly meetings, investment monitoring, comfortable life in my apartment, and frequent long stays at the renovated beach house. With one difference, I didn't need to pretend to be fragile anymore. The first time I saw my grandchildren after Jennifer's downfall was in February, a few months later, at a neutral meeting at the mall. Mike had asked to talk and decided the children should see their grandfather. Clara, then 8 years old, looked at me with childish curiosity and asked, "Grandpa Robert, is it true that you're rich?" Mike turned red. "Clara, don't ask questions like that. But Mommy said Grandpa has lots of money, and that's why she lost her job and we had to move." That phrase hit me like a punch to the stomach. Jennifer was blaming me for her own termination, for Mike's ruin. She was teaching my grandchildren that Grandpa was the villain. "Clara," I said calmly, "Grandpa has the money he worked his whole life to get. And your Mommy lost her job and Daddy had problems, because they made very wrong choices with money and with how they treated people." "Dad!" Mike protested. "What, son? Am I going to lie to my granddaughter? Let her grow up thinking I'm to blame for her mother's problems, or that honesty doesn't have consequences?" That day, returning home alone, I had my first real crisis of conscience. Not regret, I never felt that, but a disturbing reflection on the price of revenge. Yes, Jennifer had been punished. Yes, she deserved everything that happened. But my innocent grandchildren were paying too. Clara and Ethan were growing up in the middle of a war between adults, being forced to choose sides in a battle they didn't understand. And Mike, my Mike, was suffering the consequences of choices that weren't entirely his, but that he enabled. Of course, he had chosen to side with his wife when she humiliated me, when she pushed the sale of the beach house, but he was also a victim of her manipulation, of the financial dependence that prevented him from reacting. During the months that followed, I plunged into a dark phase of self-analysis. Who was I now? The respected businessman I always was, the loving grandfather who raised his son alone, or the cold avenger who destroyed a family to satisfy his own wounded ego? The answer came on a September night when I was reorganizing the investigation papers about Jennifer and Mike. I found a note I had made at the beginning of it all. I want them to feel what I felt. Mission accomplished. Jennifer had felt the humiliation, powerlessness, desperation of seeing her life crumble. Mike had experienced the crushing weight of financial ruin and legal battles. They had both experienced firsthand what it meant to be discarded, disrespected, treated like trash. But that victory had a bitter taste I hadn't expected, because in the process of destroying my enemies, I had transformed into something I didn't totally recognize. I had discovered a coldness, a capacity to cause pain that scared and fascinated me at the same time. The Jim, the Robert, who pretended fragility for 8 years, was dead. In his place was a man with power and willingness to use it without mercy, a man who knew exactly how to manipulate people and situations to get what he wanted. And the most disturbing thing? I liked this new version of myself. December 2020 brought a cautious approach with Mike. His financial situation was desperate. Jennifer remained unemployed. Their house had been put up for sale to cover the compensation. They were living in a small rented apartment. "Dad," he said in a timid call, "can you lend me money for the children's Christmas?" Lend, as if I were going to charge my own son interest. "Of course, Mike. How much do you need?" About $2,000. I'll pay back when I can." $2,000. A ridiculous amount compared to what I spent monthly, but a fortune for a struggling family. "Son, you don't need to pay me back. It's a Christmas gift." I transferred $5,000, not two. $5,000 into an account I opened specifically to help Mike without Jennifer knowing where the money came from. Because despite all my thirst for revenge, I was still a father, and fathers protect their children, even when children choose the wrong side in war. Today, in 2025, when I look back and analyze everything that happened, I have some disturbing truths to share with you who are listening. First truth, revenge really is a dish best served cold, and when you wait long enough, it becomes delicious. Jennifer never fully recovered professionally. She got some temporary jobs, consulting gigs, but never again had the stability she lost. Today, she lives in a simple house in rural Pennsylvania, works as a sales representative, earning a fraction of what she earned before. The woman who once told me to disappear, who sought to erase my past, disappeared from the prosperous life she built. Mike divorced her in 2022, not because of the thefts or the beach house. He forgave that. He divorced because he discovered she was having an affair with a colleague from her new job. Apparently, when a woman loses the financial power that sustained her arrogance, she looks for other ways to feel important. Second truth, People show who they really are when they think they have power over you, and also show who they are when they lose that power. After the divorce, Mike finally approached me for real, not out of financial necessity, although that helped, but because he understood I had been right about Jennifer's character all along. He just didn't want to see it. "Dad," he told me in a conversation we had last year, "did you know from the beginning what kind of woman she was?" "I knew, son," I replied honestly, "but you needed to discover it yourself. Why did you pretend to be dependent for so long?" "Because I loved you more than I love my own pride. I preferred to be humiliated than to see you unhappy, to see your family break apart." That question tormented me for days. Forgiveness is a complicated word when it comes to family betrayal. I understood Mike's circumstances, understood the pressure he suffered, understood the fear that prevented him from reacting, but understanding isn't the same as forgiving. "Son," I finally replied, "it's not about forgiveness. It's about understanding that people make choices, and choices have consequences. You made your choices. I made mine. Now we live with the consequences." Third truth, and perhaps the most important, there's an emotional price for all revenge, even when it's justified. I'm no longer the same person who was humiliated that March 2020. The coldness I developed to plan and execute Jennifer's and Mike's comeuppance didn't disappear when the revenge ended. It became part of who I am. Today, at 72 years old, I'm a man respected in the business world, feared by some, admired by others. I have a cordial relationship with my son. I see my grandchildren regularly. I live comfortably with my wealth, and I spend long, peaceful months at my fully restored beach house. But I'm also a man who discovered he's capable of calculated cruelty. A man who feels satisfaction remembering the despair in Jennifer's eyes when she realized she had underestimated the wrong person. And you know what disturbs me most? That I would do it all again. If I had to choose between continuing to pretend fragility and revealing my true power, I would choose revelation. If I had to choose between accepting humiliation and retaliating with total destruction, I would retaliate, because I learned something about myself in that process. I prefer to be feared and respected than loved and despised. Fourth truth, never underestimate an elderly man who built wealth alone, especially if he's pretending to be more fragile than he really is. We men of my generation survived a world that didn't give us equal opportunities. We raised children alone, built businesses in competitive markets. We accumulated wealth by being smarter than the smart Alexas who tried to deceive us. And when you provoke us, when you mess with our family, when you humiliate us thinking we're defenseless, well, you discover that you completely underestimated our capacity for retaliation. Jennifer learned this the hard way. Others can learn from her example, or they can find out for themselves that the seemingly useless old man can be the most dangerous person they'll encounter in life. So for you who are listening to me, I leave some final advice. If you have a father-in-law, father, or any elderly man in the family, treat him with respect, not because he's fragile and deserves pity, but because he may be much more powerful than you imagine. If you're a young man being disrespected by daughters-in-law, sons-in-law, or family members, know that you don't need to accept humiliation in the name of family harmony. Harmony built on disrespect isn't harmony, it's submission. And if you're a woman who thinks you can humiliate elderly men because they're dependent or outdated, be careful, very careful, because you might be messing with someone who has power, resources, and patience enough to destroy your life completely. The story I told you isn't about a sweet old man who discovered how to defend himself. It's about an experienced businessman who pretended fragility for years and then revealed his true power devastatingly. It's about calculated revenge, poetic justice, and irreversible transformation. It's about discovering that sometimes being cruel is necessary to earn respect. And it's about the disturbing fact that when you taste well-executed revenge, you never go back to being the same person. Today, my grandchildren are older. Claire is 13 and Ethan is 9. They grew up knowing that Grandpa Robert is someone who should be respected, not out of fear, but out of genuine admiration. Mike today works with me, managing some of my businesses. He learns quickly and has a natural talent for finance that he inherited from me, a talent that had been stifled by Jennifer's shadow. In 2023, I received an unexpected letter, a simple envelope delivered to my office. The sender, Jennifer Martinez. I confess I was curious. After 3 years without any contact, what could she want? Inside the envelope, a handwritten letter, impeccable handwriting, as Jennifer always was, organized even in defeat. Robert, it began, I write this letter after much reflection. I don't expect forgiveness or reconciliation. I just felt the need to express something I've been carrying since that day in November 2020. You won completely. You didn't just destroy my career and my marriage, but also my arrogance. And for that, ironically, I'm grateful. The last 3 years have been the hardest of my life. I lost everything I valued: status, money, power. At first, I blamed you. It was easier. But eventually, when the anger diminished, I could see clearly what really happened. I dug my own grave. Every irregularity, every humiliation I imposed on you, every lie to Mike, they were all my choices that culminated in that moment in the conference room. Today, I work honestly. I earn less, live more simply, but I sleep better. I never imagined that it would be precisely the man I most despised who would teach me the most valuable lesson of my life. I don't expect a response. I just wanted you to know that despite everything, you made me a better person. I read the letter 3 times in a row. I didn't feel joy nor satisfaction, just a strange peace. The revenge was truly complete, in a way I hadn't even planned. I hadn't just destroyed the arrogant Jennifer from before, but apparently had contributed to the birth of a new version of her. I kept the letter in a drawer and never responded. Some circles need to close by themselves. At the end of last year, I learned through Mike that Jennifer moved to the south. She started a small bed and breakfast on a quiet beach in the Carolinas. From what I heard, she's doing well. Not rich like before, but at peace with herself. The compensation of $1.5 million was paid in full, even a few months early. Jennifer never tried to contact me again. Neither did I. As for me, I continue being that man who discovered his own power at 67. At every business meeting where my opinion is respected, at every family dinner where no one dares interrupt me, I remember that November 2020 day when I decided I would never be humiliated again. Sometimes late at night, when I'm alone in my office or at my beach house, I ask myself if it was worth it. If the emotional price we all paid, me, Mike, the grandchildren, and even Jennifer, was justified. I don't have a definitive answer. I just know I couldn't have acted differently. Some say revenge is a dish that after eaten leaves a bitter taste in your mouth. I disagree. What leaves the bitter taste isn't revenge itself, but discovering what we're capable of doing when provoked beyond our limit. The discovery that under the civilized surface there exists an implacable determination that knows no mercy. In the end, my story isn't about a conflict between a father-in-law and daughter-in-law. It's about power, about the masks we wear, about the danger of underestimating people based only on appearances. It's about the consequences that follow every choice we make. Recently, Mike asked me if I regret anything. I looked at my son, today a stronger and more independent man than he ever was, and answered honestly, "Regret what I did to Jennifer? Regret the price you and the children paid? Yes, every day." He nodded, understanding the complexity behind my answer. Maybe that's the true legacy of my revenge, understanding that justice and cruelty sometimes walk hand in hand, that winning doesn't always mean coming out unscathed, and that some victories carry permanent scars. Today, at 72, I'm richer, more respected, and lonelier than I ever was. Revenge gave me everything I wanted and took away things I didn't know I would lose. But if I had to do it all again, I would, because a man's dignity is priceless. And that was the final lesson I left for Jennifer, for Mike, and for anyone who one day crosses my path. Never, ever underestimate an old man who has patience and nothing to lose. Behind the kind smile and wrinkled hands, there may exist an implacable strategist just waiting for the right moment to show who he really is. And that, my dear listener, is the true power of the underestimated. Don't discard us. Don't despise us. Don't humiliate us. Because you never know who we really are until it's too late. And that's my story, folks. If this resonated with you, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe to Wise Revenge for more stories like this one, and I want to hear from you in the comments. Where are you watching from? Have you ever had to deal with a situation where someone completely underestimated you? Share your story below. Remember, respect isn't given freely. Sometimes it has to be earned through strength. Until next time, this has been Robert Miller reminding you that wisdom comes with age, but power comes with patience.